I stepped into the shimmering lights of the celebration hall with a cautious smile, telling myself that tonight would be nothing more than laughter, cake, and the kind of polite small talk that filled birthdays. The truth was, I already carried a heaviness in my chest as I crossed the marble floor, my heels clicking against the polished stone like little reminders that I didn't quite belong here. My name is Elise Carter, and at 32 years old, I thought I had already grown used to my family's indifference. I believed nothing they said or did could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. The evening was supposed to be about my older sister, Serena, turning 35. She was the kind of woman who could command attention without effort. The way her laughter rippled across the room made heads turn, and the designer dress she wore sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. She floated from guest to guest, basking in compliments, while I hung near the edge of the crowd, sipping wine I had paid for and trying to swallow the sting of being invisible in my own family's home. I had contributed more than $800 toward tonight's festivities. A collection of rare vintage wine, a portion of the chef's fee, and small details my parents would never acknowledge. Yet, when my mother drifted past me with her perfected smile, she didn't even pause to say thank you. Her attention was fixed on making sure Serena's cake table looked flawless. My father greeted guests with booming laughter, his arm around Serena, bragging about her charm, her grace, her free spirit. I stood just a few feet away, the chief technology officer of a growing company, the owner of a penthouse I had worked countless nights to afford, and still, in their eyes, I was not enough. Conversations bubbled around me like static, full of polite judgment disguised as family warmth. Aunt Caroline leaned in to whisper that Serena was still just finding her path, while nodding with approval, as if joblessness at 35 was a noble pursuit. Uncle Henry laughed about how I was too busy for a family, his glass lifted in toast to a woman who had built nothing yet still had the spotlight. Even my younger cousin smirked as he asked what was the point of a successful career if I remained alone. Their words sliced like invisible knives, each one digging into the years I had spent proving myself. The setting was beautiful, almost cruelly so. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlanta skyline in shimmering light. A quartet played gentle music in the background, the sound filling the cavernous living room like an expensive soundtrack. Yet beneath the glitter, the air felt heavy. Every laugh at my expense, every comparison between me and Serena, added to the weight pressing against my ribs. I smiled when spoken to. I nodded when someone praised Serena's free spirit, and I laughed politely at jokes I didn't find funny. But deep inside, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of false admiration that excluded me completely. Then my father raised a glass and called for silence. The music faded, the chatter died down, and all eyes turned toward him. I held my breath, hoping this moment might be different, that maybe he would acknowledge both of his daughters tonight. But his booming voice shattered that fragile hope in an instant. With a broad smile and the microphone clutched in his hand, he announced that I, Elise, would be gifting my penthouse to Serena as her birthday present. My heart stopped, my mouth went dry. Around me, 30 guests gasped and clapped, already celebrating the generosity I had never agreed to. My mind screamed in disbelief. That penthouse wasn't just an apartment. It was my sanctuary, the place built brick by brick from years of late nights coding, pitching, and clawing my way up a corporate ladder no one thought I could climb. Yet here it was, being treated like a party favor in front of a room filled with acquaintances and family who had always doubted me. Serena pressed her hand to her chest, feigning surprise, but I caught the glint in her eyes. She knew. This was no spontaneous announcement. It was orchestrated. I stood frozen with a wine glass in my hand, the chill of the crystal unable to cool the fire burning in my chest. My father's voice thundered about family responsibility, about how it was only fair that I help my struggling sister, and my mother chimed in with her soft yet pointed encouragement. "It's the least you can do," she said sweetly, as if generosity was a duty, not a choice. Aunt Caroline added her pressure. Uncle Henry nodded in approval, and whispers swept the room. The walls seemed to close in on me as the weight of expectation grew heavier. I set my glass down, my hand steady despite the storm inside. My voice came out clear, firm, and sharper than I thought possible. I said no. The word sliced through the chatter like a blade. Gasps echoed, applause faltered, and my father's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, as he demanded I repeat myself. I stood straighter, meeting his gaze without flinching. I told the room that my penthouse was mine, earned with every late night and every sacrifice. Serena's struggles were not my burden to carry. My words hung in the air, unapologetic, undeniable. Serena's face crumpled with practiced tears, but I saw the truth behind them. My mother hissed that I was embarrassing the family. Aunt Caroline clutched her necklace in mock horror, and the guests whispered judgments that filled the silence. Cold, ungrateful, selfish. Yet for the first time that night, I felt something different rise inside me. Not shame, not guilt, but freedom. The more they pushed, the more I realized I no longer wanted their approval. Standing there, in a room full of people who dismissed my worth, I chose myself. But that choice had consequences. My father stepped closer, his face twisted with rage. His voice barked accusations, and before I could react, his hand struck across my cheek with a crack that silenced the room. The sting burned through my skin, my earring flew across the floor, and the weight of 30 stares pressed harder than ever. Phones lifted, someone whispered they were recording, and in that moment, with pain spreading through my face but a steadiness settling in my chest, I understood that my life had just changed forever. The room froze after the sound of the slap, the kind of silence that comes only when something unthinkable has just happened. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I reached down with calm precision, picking up the pearl earring that had skittered across the floor. I turned it over in my hand, its cool surface grounding me in the middle of the chaos. When I stood again, I locked eyes with Serena, who was standing beside our father with her mouth covered in feigned shock. My voice was low but carried through the hush. "Happy birthday, Serena." That was all I said before I walked out, leaving the murmurs and gasps behind me. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing me away from the judgment and whispers. My cheek throbbed, but my heart felt strangely steady. I leaned against the marble wall of the hallway, letting the cold seep through the fabric of my dress. My phone trembled in my hand as I dialed the one person who would understand. Kayla Morgan answered on the first ring. She was my best friend, the one person who had seen every scar and every triumph in my life. "Elise, are you okay?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. I swallowed hard, forcing steadiness into my tone. "He hit me, Kayla, in front of everyone. He demanded I give Serena my home, and when I refused, he struck me." My voice cracked, but I wouldn't let myself collapse. There was a pause, heavy with the weight of her anger, before Kayla's voice sliced through. "That's it. You're done with them. You've carried that family for years, and this is how they repay you? Enough." Her conviction steadied me like armor. She reminded me of the one person who could cut through the Carter family's poisonous games, my grandmother, Margaret. At 80 years old, Margaret was the matriarch, the one who held the financial strings and the moral authority. She had always seen through the lies, and though she wasn't quick to intervene, Kayla knew this moment demanded it. "Call her, Elise, she won't let this stand." My fingers shook as I scrolled to Margaret's name and pressed the call button. Each ring tightened the knot in my stomach until her steady voice came through. "Elise?" she said, expectant and strong. The words tumbled out of me. Then the public humiliation, the demand for my penthouse, the slap that still burned on my cheek. Her silence on the other end was sharp as steel. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of judgment itself. "Stay where you are. I'll handle this." Half an hour later, the party that had begun with chandeliers and champagne was interrupted by the sharp tap of Margaret's silver cane against the marble floor. She entered the room like a storm in human form. Every conversation died, every laugh turned to dust. My father's face drained of color when he saw her, the microphone slipping in his hand. Margaret's eyes cut across the crowd until they landed on him. "Daniel," she said, her voice like a blade. "Explain to me why you laid a hand on my granddaughter." The room seemed to shrink, every guest holding their breath. My father stammered, but Margaret raised her cane and silenced him before he could muster an excuse. Her command was not loud, yet it thundered. "You have 5 minutes to find the earring you knocked from her ear, or I will deal with this myself." The air turned electric. Guests exchanged panicked glances, unsure whether to move or freeze. Serena dropped to her knees, searching frantically across the floor, her designer gown pooling like spilled ink around her. My mother clutched at my father's arm, her face pale with dread. "Mother, please," she whispered, but Margaret's raised hand silenced her too. Aunt Caroline and Uncle Henry stood rigid, their smugness dissolved into fear. Every eye in the room watched as Margaret shifted her gaze from face to face. Then her voice rang out again, sharp and unwavering. "Elise is the only one I trust. She built her life with her own hands, with no excuses, no handouts." Her words cut through decades of lies. She named my father as a man unfit to lead his family fairly. She called out my mother for enabling Serena into uselessness. She turned on Serena herself, her voice dropping, cold and merciless. "You have taken enough from your sister." The gasps that followed seemed to shake the walls. Guests pulled out their phones again, recording every moment as the carefully built image of the Carter family crumbled in public. Margaret declared her decision with the finality of a judge. "I am rewriting my will. Everything I own, my estate, my investments, my properties will go to Elise." Chaos erupted. My mother's wail cracked the silence. Serena collapsed into a chair, sobbing in true desperation now. My father's jaw clenched, his silence louder than words. Aunt Caroline whispered in disbelief, while Uncle Henry turned as pale as stone. Around them, guests murmured, some in pity, others in awe, their phones capturing history in real time. I stood at the back of the room, my cheek still burning, but my heart steady. Margaret had not just defended me, she had rewritten the balance of power in one moment. When her eyes met mine, she gave me a nod, fierce and proud, as though to tell me this was the beginning of my freedom. Serena's sobs grew louder, begging for forgiveness, but Margaret was unmoved. Her voice remained cold. "You knew what your father planned, and you let it happen." My father tried one last attempt, his words trembling. "Mother, you're overreacting. Elise is strong. She'll be fine." But Margaret's reply was thunder. "She is strong because she had to be. No thanks to you." The words struck harder than any slap. My mother tried to salvage the night, whispering that we were still family, but Margaret's cane struck the floor with a final crack. No more. The party's glitter collapsed into ruin. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some leaving, others lingering with their phones still recording. Serena's tears mixed with the sound of whispered judgment. My mother's panic painted across her face, and my father's silence hung heavy in the air. Margaret turned away from them all and walked toward me. She did not ask about the earring hidden in my pocket. She didn't need to. Her declaration was final. "This family has failed you, Elise." Her words became a shield, wrapping around me as I followed her gaze. The chaos blurred into the background, and I realized the night that had begun as another performance of favoritism had become something far greater. It was the breaking point, the moment I finally understood that blood alone did not define family. Respect did, truth did, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. That night I returned to my penthouse, the one place that still felt like mine. The city skyline glowed beyond the windows, glittering towers and endless streets, each light a reminder of the countless hours I had poured into building this life. I sank onto the couch, my cheeks still tender, my heart heavy yet oddly calm. My phone buzzed non-stop as notifications rolled in. The video of my father striking me had already gone viral. Clips spread across every platform, captions condemning his actions, hashtags calling out the Carter family. I scrolled through comment after comment. "This is disgusting. Elise deserves better." Someone else posted, "Strength like hers is rare." Thousands of shares amplified the outrage, and suddenly, the family that had dismissed me was at the center of public scandal. Kayla arrived not long after, her eyes blazing with protective fury. She wrapped me in a hug so fierce I finally allowed myself to exhale. "You did the right thing," she said, sitting beside me with a look that could have burned through steel. "They don't deserve another chance to hurt you." I nodded, the words sinking deep, solidifying a decision I had already begun to make. I wasn't going back. But just as I began to settle into the strange stillness of the night, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my parents stood on the threshold. My father's shoulders were slumped, his booming confidence gone, while my mother's eyes were red and swollen. "Elise, we need to talk," my father said quietly. My mother added, "We're sorry." The pressure to support Serena got out of hand. "Please forgive us." I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway with my body. Do you think an apology fixes this? You demanded my home and then struck me when I refused. You humiliated me in front of everyone. My voice was calm but sharp, each word carrying the weight of betrayal. My father flinched at the reminder, but my mother pressed forward, desperation dripping from every syllable. We're family. We made a mistake. The word mistake echoed in my ears like an insult. Their mistake had been years in the making, choosing Serena over me time after time, treating my accomplishments like dust while lifting her failures like trophies. I shook my head. Your mistake cost me my trust, I said coldly. And once trust is gone, it does not return. I stepped back, closing the door before their pleas could seep further into me. Their silhouettes blurred against the frosted glass as the lock clicked into place. My heart raced. But in that moment, I felt lighter, as though I had dropped a weight I had been dragging for years. Kayla was there with coffee not long after, her steady presence filling the silence. Together we sat scrolling through the wave of online backlash. Clips of Margaret's speech circulated, her words tearing through the lies my family had built for decades. Headlines bloomed across local news, framing my father as a violent patriarch and Serena as a spoiled socialite. Kayla's lips curved into a sharp smile. Let them face the consequences, she said. You're stronger than they'll ever be. Cut them off for good. Her words sank into me, rooting deeply. For years I had clawed for their approval, begged for their recognition, fought for scraps of affection. And for what? To be struck in front of 30 people, and told to hand over my home. No more. That night, I blocked their numbers, silenced their voices, and drew a line I would never allow them to cross again. The next morning, an email from Margaret arrived. My breath caught as I read her words. Elise, my decision stands. The will is being redrafted with your name as the sole heir. You have proven your worth not only to me but to yourself. Stay strong. I read it twice, letting the words wash over me. They weren't just legal promises, they were validation. Proof that someone in this family saw me, respected me, believed in me. 3 months passed, and life shifted in ways I hadn't expected. The scandal that erupted from Serena's party spread like wildfire. Her engagement to Ethan crumbled as his family distanced themselves from the baggage of her name. My father's business faltered, clients pulling away from deals tainted by disgrace. My mother's social circle thinned, her charity events sparsely attended, whispers chasing her at every turn. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a quiet acceptance that they had built this collapse with their own choices. In contrast, my world bloomed. I had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer, my name etched on a glass award for innovation in artificial intelligence. At the ceremony, as colleagues applauded and cameras flashed, I thought of every late night spent coding, every pitch that landed contracts worth millions, every moment I refused to give up. The award sparkled not as a symbol of revenge, but as a reminder that my worth had never depended on their recognition. Kayla became my anchor through it all. We met weekly, her laughter filling the space of my penthouse like a healing melody. We planned trips, debated technology trends, and carved out a friendship that was more family than blood ever had been. My colleagues, too, embraced me with genuine respect. Dinners, brainstorming sessions, and unexpected toasts reminded me that the right people saw my value clearly. And Margaret, my fierce grandmother, remained my truest ally. Over lunch one afternoon, she handed me the legal papers finalizing the transfer of her estate. Her eyes gleamed as she told me, "You're the only one I trust. You have my spirit, Elise." I hugged her tightly, my throat burning with emotion. She called often afterward, her stories of youth laced with wisdom that grounded me as I stepped fully into my new life. Standing once more at the window of my penthouse, the Atlanta skyline stretched before me like a canvas of possibilities. The battles of the past had scarred me, but they had also forged me. I understood now that personal boundaries were sacred. That family was not defined by shared blood, but by the respect and loyalty of those who lifted you up. For the first time in my life, I felt untethered from their judgment, unshackled from their control. I picked up my phone and texted Kayla about our next meetup. As I hit send, a calm settled over me. The Carter family's drama was behind me, fading into the distance. My future stretched ahead, bright and unapologetic, and for the first time, I was ready to step into it without fear. The months that followed brought a different rhythm to my life, one I had never known before. Without the constant weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on me, I woke each morning with a kind of freedom that felt foreign at first, like stepping into sunlight after years in a dim room. My penthouse, once a battleground in my mind, became a sanctuary. I filled it with plants, art, and books, small touches that turned the sleek glass and marble walls into a place that reflected me, not just my success. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, whispering reminders of the family ties I had cut, but then Kayla would show up with takeout or a bottle of wine, and the silence would shift into laughter. She was the sister I had chosen, her loyalty fierce, her presence a balm. We spoke often about the meaning of family, about how bloodlines could fail you while friendships could save you. She reminded me that the bonds we build with love and respect are far stronger than the ones handed to us at birth. At work, I stepped fully into my role as Chief Technology Officer. The company was expanding, and with expansion came challenges that tested every ounce of my resilience. I thrived in the chaos late-night problem-solving sessions, negotiations with investors, guiding a team that looked to me for leadership. When we closed a deal worth millions, my team surprised me with a toast. To Elise, who proves hard work pays off, one of my colleagues declared. The room filled with applause, genuine and untainted, and I felt something shift inside me. These were my people. They saw me not as a daughter overshadowed, but as a leader, an innovator, someone worthy of admiration on her own terms. Meanwhile, the Carter family's reputation crumbled in ways I couldn't have scripted. Serena's name was whispered with disdain in social circles that once adored her. Invitations stopped arriving. Her engagement was not only broken but publicly so, with Ethan's family citing the unnecessary drama as their reason. My mother's charity luncheons, once bustling, dwindled to sparse gatherings with forced smiles. My father's company struggled as clients severed ties, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace. Every downfall was documented in headlines, in conversations that trailed behind them at grocery stores and restaurants. I didn't revel in their ruin. I didn't need to. Their collapse wasn't my victory, it was simply the consequence of their choices. I had finally separated my identity from theirs, realizing that their failures were not my responsibility, just as their approval was not my salvation. Margaret stood firmly at my side during this shift, her strength unwavering. She called me nearly every evening, sometimes with advice, sometimes just to share stories from her youth. She told me about her battles, about how she too had once been underestimated, dismissed, and forced to fight for respect in a world that demanded her silence. "You carry my fire," she told me one night, her voice strong despite her age. "Don't ever let anyone dim it." Her words became a mantra, echoing in my mind during moments when doubt tried to creep back in. One afternoon, over lunch at her favorite cafe, she handed me another set of documents. These finalized the transfer of her estate, her investments, her properties. The weight of the papers in my hands was nothing compared to the weight of her trust. "You're the only one I trust to carry this forward," she said. Tears pricked my eyes, not because of the wealth or the power, but because of the validation. For so long, I had begged my parents to see me. Now, I realized I no longer needed them to. I had someone far more powerful on my side, someone who saw me for who I truly was. The city outside my window became a reflection of my journey, bright, sprawling, unpredictable. Nights alone no longer felt empty, they felt full of potential. I read more, cooked meals I never had time for before, and allowed myself the luxury of dreaming about the future without the shadow of my family's demands. For the first time, my life was mine in every sense. One evening, as Kayla and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset turn the skyline gold, she leaned back in her chair with a smile. "You know, Elise, you didn't just survive what they did to you. You rose above it. You're living proof that we're not defined by the people who hurt us, but by how we choose to move forward." Her words settled into me, warm and steady. I raised my glass to hers and said, "Then here's to moving forward." The clink of crystal against crystal rang out like a promise, one I knew I would keep. I had spent years chasing their approval, years believing that without their love, I was incomplete. But the truth was clear now. I was whole all along, and in that truth, I finally found peace. The seasons shifted, And with them, so did I. Autumn painted Atlanta in shades of copper and gold, and I found myself walking through the parks on quiet mornings, breathing in the cool air with a sense of gratitude I had never known. Each leaf that fell reminded me of what I had shed: the need for approval, the ache for belonging in a family that had never truly seen me. In its place, I carried something stronger: the certainty that my worth was not dependent on anyone's acceptance but my own. Work kept me busy, but not in the suffocating way it once had. I had learned balance. There were nights I stayed late, guiding my team through challenges, but there were also nights I shut my laptop early to meet Kayla for dinner or to curl up with a novel in my living room. I no longer felt like I was proving something to invisible judges. Now, everything I did was for me, for the joy of building, for the satisfaction of growth, for the future I envisioned. The city continued to buzz with whispers about the Carter family, though their scandal no longer dominated the headlines. Still, remnants of the fallout followed them. My father's company shrank, losing contracts steadily until he was forced to sell shares. My mother's social circle abandoned her entirely, leaving her isolated in the very community she had once ruled. Serena, stripped of her engagement and her reputation, moved back into my parents' house. For years she had floated on their praise like a golden balloon, but now, with the air gone, she crumpled under the weight of reality. I heard all of this secondhand, through friends or mutual acquaintances. I never reached out, never asked directly. The cord was severed, and I had no intention of tying it back together. Some nights I wondered if they regretted what they had done, if they sat awake replaying the night of Serena's birthday party, haunted by the moment everything shattered. But those thoughts never lingered long. Whether they regretted it or not didn't matter. What mattered was that I was free. Margaret and I grew closer than ever. She became not only my protector but my confidant, her wisdom a guiding light. On Sundays, I visited her home, where she would tell stories of her youth, how she had defied expectations in an era that punished women for ambition, how she had carved her independence despite whispers and judgment. I realized then that the fire in me was not just mine. It was hers, passed down through generations. "You are the future of this family," she told me one afternoon, her hand resting firmly over mine. Not the past. Her faith in me was more powerful than any inheritance. Still, the legal documents she placed in my hands carried weight I could not ignore. I was now responsible for her estate, her properties, her investments. It was a legacy that could shape more than just my life. It could create opportunities for others, fund innovations, and build something enduring. I promised myself that I would honor her trust not by clinging to wealth but by using it with purpose. Kayla remained my anchor through it all. We planned a trip together, something I had never allowed myself to dream about during the years I was chained to family obligations. Standing on the balcony of a seaside villa, we laughed until our cheeks ached, sipping wine and letting the ocean breeze carry away the last remnants of bitterness. It struck me then how profoundly life had changed, not because of money or status, but because I had finally chosen myself. When winter came, I stood once again by my penthouse window, the city lights twinkling like stars scattered across the earth. I thought about the girl I had been before that night, the one who sought her family's approval like air. I wished I could reach back and tell her she was already enough, that she didn't need their validation to shine. But perhaps that was the point sometimes. We only learn our strength when it is tested in the harshest of ways. I touched the award on my shelf, its glass surface cool under my fingertips. It wasn't just a symbol of my career, it was proof of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every refusal to give up. Proof that I could stand on my own, unshaken. I glanced at the text from Kayla waiting on my phone, a reminder that true family was not defined by blood but by loyalty, respect, and love freely given. As the year drew to a close, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. The Carter family's story no longer defined me. Their downfall was theirs alone, and my rise was mine. The drama of the past had burned away, leaving room for something far greater: peace, clarity, and the freedom to build a life untouched by their shadows. The future stretched ahead, wide and bright. And for the first time, I was not just surviving, I was living.